Ever since they got eliminated, I've been very excited to talk about this upcoming season from the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a very interesting situation they find themselves in. They have this typical media noise that surrounds a really likable young star in a small market. This They're going to want to ask out, go to a bigger market, be a bigger star. Nobody wants to play in Minnesota, that type of thing. When ESPN is done with this Giannis story, when he finally gets traded after, I feel like we've been listening to this story for years now, they're going to move on to Anthony Edwards being the next guy they put that ticking clock on. And this Minnesota front office, they understand that, but it does represent a challenge because they do have to continue improving this team while maintaining its window. They don't have a lot of picks to do it, and they're capped out. So a challenging situation, but I think they're up to the task. And I have a pitch in particular for how I think they should go about doing it. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I want to start by taking a look at their roster, and I have it pulled up here in front of me. We have Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid on the same timeline on the books for the next 3 seasons at least. Edwards is 25, McDaniels 26, Reid is 27. That's what you want to see. You want that young core built around your star. And with Edwards being only 25, you have a multiple year runway here. This idea that they have to get to the finals next season or the year after, I just don't think is necessarily true. I think you need to demonstrate that you're taking a step forward and you're competing with the likes of Oklahoma City and San Antonio. But just because you lose to one of those teams doesn't mean we need to ring alarm bells. And that's important to keep in mind when deciding how to move forward with this Minnesota team. If we're not careful, we can do something too big, too risky, and end up shrinking our window. And suddenly we're looking at Edwards in 2028, 29, wanting to be traded before the end of his current contract. We want to show Anthony Edwards, when it comes time to sign that next Supermax extension, that he is supported for the next multiple years. We can't have a Milwaukee situation where we have a player that needs a new contract and we have very few avenues to compete. That's what we're trying to set ourselves up for here for Minnesota, because this is a team that was in the second apron in 2024-25. And if you're not familiar with the second apron rules, that started a 5-year window where your 2032 pick, the pick that's 7 years out, is frozen. And they don't have the ability to trade that pick because of that. The only way that pick gets unfrozen is if they stay under the second apron for 3 out of the following 4 seasons. So they were over in 2024-25. That started the 5-year window. They were under this season. They need to stay under the next 2 seasons. That puts them in 2028-29 in a position to have multiple firsts to trade, including that 2032 that would be unfrozen. And it would put them in a position to go into the second apron to retain Anthony Edwards' massive extension, because they will have reset the clock on all of those penalties, and they'll then start a new 5-year window. That should be the plan if you're them. Do not go into the second apron and leave that 2032 pick frozen, because that's going to continue to restrict you from trades you can make. It's more important to maintain the ability to unfreeze that pick and trade it than it is to go into the second apron right now. Going back to the roster, outside of those 3 young guys, you have Gobert and Randall as the 2 main contributors, both in their 30s. Gobert's going to be 35 next season, making $36.5 million with a $38 million player option. I think after next season, he's going to opt out of that player option, and him and the team are going to come to terms on a 3-year, $60 million, something like that. Something that'll bring his cap number down by, in that case, it'll be 18 million if he comes down from 38 to 20. I strongly believe he's going to do that, because the alternative would be opting into that 38 million, playing out the season, and then being 36, 37, looking for a new contract. You're probably not going to get a lot of money in that case after your age 36 season. It's unlikely. As far as Julius Randle, I expect him to get traded. We'll get into that here in a moment. We have Dante DiVincenzo, $12.5 million expiring with a torn Achilles. He's kind of on the Jason Tatum timeline. Tatum tore his Achilles in the second round of the playoffs last season, came back at around March and played the end of the season and started the playoffs healthy. I think we can reasonably expect DiVincenzo to be back before next year's playoffs, but I look at him as a strong trade candidate. I actually think there's a very good chance that he gets traded, waived, and re-signed to the team, just like they did with Mike Conley. We have Johan Behringer, a guy I expect to see a big role increase this upcoming season. Terrence Shannon Jr., who also needs to see his role increased. Julian Phillips, a young guy they got in the Dosunmu trade, and then a couple of two-way players. Free agents, Jalen Clark, Bones Highland, and of course, Ayo Dosunmu. Depending on what happens with Ayo, he's priority number one. The other two guys we may not be able to bring them back because I would bet that they're going to command more than the veteran minimum. Jalen Clark is a restricted free agent with a $3 million qualifying offer. If he accepts the qualifying offer, then we can afford him. If he gets a 2-year, $10 million deal from somewhere else, we're going to have to let him walk because we are that close to the second apron. And I'll show you that in a moment. And same goes for Bones Highland. I think he's very likely to get some small multi-year deal to go be a backup for another team. The next graphic I have here is their pick situation. Big narrative around Minnesota is they need to find a running mate for Anthony Edwards. And I think Anthony Edwards has excellent chemistry with his teammates. They feel like a tight-knit group when you watch them play. But I do agree that they are missing a reliable second option offensively. We need to be more scared of another guy on the court, and I think that's what Minnesota's missing. But you look at their pick situation, they've given away all of their assets to build the team that they have, mainly from the Gobert trade and then small trades after that. The only first that's left untouched is in 2028, and they can't trade it outright because they don't have a 2027 or 2029 pick. They can only trade a swap. And a swap with Minnesota is not that valuable. And then, as I said, the 2032 pick is frozen. So you can't move that either. They can trade swaps on swaps, which they've done, but that's only for minor moves. If we're talking about them going out and acquiring a Giannis or a Trey Murphy, some big name like that, I don't think it's possible with their current set of assets. Unless you're ready to trade McDaniels and Reed, which I don't think that makes you better. And I think it hurts your window around Edwards. As you can see, from a pick perspective, they're stuck and they're going to have to be okay with not trading picks for the next several seasons as they stay under the second apron. So here's the cap hierarchy. And I put this graphic together to help illustrate what cap integrity actually means. Because if you stack the players on your roster in a pyramid, it's very easy to see how important they are. And at each level of your roster where you're investing your salary cap. This table on the right, I've put together a budget based on the $222 million second apron figure. The first apron's 209 and the tax is 201. So based on that $222 million, I've budgeted a certain amount to spend at each of the 5 layers of the pyramid. Your best player at the top, your second and third best player in the middle, or in the second row. Middle row is your 4th and 5th starters and your 6th man. 4th row is your 7th through 10th. So those top 4 rows is your 10-man rotation. And then lastly, the bottom row is your depth pieces, your roster spots 11 through 15, which it's worth noting, you are required to have 14 contracts. You can leave that 15th empty and fill it in with a two-way player. A lot of teams close up to the second apron, like Minnesota is going to be, opts to only carry 14 contracts in order to create a little bit of extra room. But this is the current state of affairs. You have Edwards with a budget for the best player on a contending team being about 57.5. If you look at all of the guys making the most money in the league, generally they're right around 55 to 60 million. That's changing quickly with each new max contract that gets signed. Pretty soon we're going to see that be the high 60s, low 70s. But for right now, that's where most of the contracts are, most of the salary numbers. And Edwards is at 49, so you're saving money there. Next row, I think your second best player should make around 40, and your third best player should be around 30. So that gives you a $70 million budget for your second and third player. And for Gobert and McDaniels, which I believe this is the identity of the team, Edwards, Gobert, and McDaniels. Gobert's at 36.5, McDaniels is at 26.2. You're just over 7 million under that budget. Beyond that, you have Julius Randle, who's your 4th starter. He's making 33.3, which is high for a 4th starter. Now, some of you may argue he's more important, that he's a 2 or a 3. I think that this team relies more on Gobert and McDaniels than they do on Randall. So I think he's a number 4. The number 5 is Naz Reid, even though he comes off the bench, with your 6th being Dosunmu. That's your top 6 right now when you look at the active roster. Just Randall and Reid hit that $57 million budget for that middle layer. So that shows you that when they re-sign Dosunmu, they're going to be well over budget for your 4th through 6th players. 4th row, we've got DiVincenzo, which, again, I expect him to be moved. Terrence Shannon Jr. is still on his rookie deal, making 4.4. Bones Highland needs a new contract. As I said, I think he's going to be gone. And Behringer is also at 4.4. And then last layer, you have your veteran minimums, Conley, Anderson, Ingles. You've got the young guy, Phillips. And then Jalen Clark is currently there because he's restricted. But again, I expect him to get some sort of offer that forces Minnesota to let him walk. So that's the current state of affairs. The actual spend there comes out to $202 million. So without Bones Highland and Dosunmu under contract, you're looking at $20 million of breathing room under the second apron. And that's right around what people expect Dosunmu to get in free agency. So that's what I wanted to talk about next is Dosunmu's free agent situation, because this is a fascinating one. There are some teams with cap space, and the free agent market is kind of light. And in particular, a team like the Lakers is desperate for defensive, young wings, athletic. You need these kind of wings around Luka and Reeves. It's an interesting market for him. He's going to be overvalued. He had a major game against Denver. And so what we have to ask ourselves going into negotiations here is, what is Dosunmu's actual standing in the league? Is he being overvalued because of a scarcity in the free agent market? Probably. And is he being overvalued because of what we just saw before they were eliminated? I think that's a yes also. Before that, the larger sample size, we saw him be a very effective 6-man guard off the bench type. He's a good 3-point shooter and a good defender. Didn't show himself to be a reliable long-term starter. He never had that opportunity, so we haven't seen it. Doesn't mean he can't do it, but we're taking a risk signing him to a deal that makes him a starter. Like I said, in that 3rd row there with the money Reid is making, the money McDaniels is making, you give Dosunmu $25 million, that's starter money. And if you're not actually making him a starter, you now have this inefficiency in your cap that has to be made up elsewhere, either by a young player who's underpaid for what they provide. You get the idea. I'm not saying you can't pay him that amount, but it does put you in a bind. It's very possible that he sees this as, this is my opportunity to make as much money as I can. And I don't fault him for that. I went ahead and pulled up the figures for guys in his price range. The absolute most expensive example that Dosunmu and his agent can point at and say, this is what Dosunmu should be making, is a guy like Isaiah Quickly, making $32.5 million. If some team wants to pay Dosunmu that, you are letting him go if you're Minnesota, and you figure it out. You're not paying him that much money. Your roster's too expensive, and you just can't do it. You would have to possibly look at dumping Randall. There's no scenario, I think, where you pay Dosunmu $30 million and your team comes back next year better than it was this year. Devin Vassell is a step down from that, 27.5. Josh Giddey's at 25. Trey Murphy's 25. Jaden McDaniels, as I mentioned, is 24, 25 range. And that's where we get into the guys that I think actually align best with Dosunmu. Josh Hart, he's making 19.4 this season, 20.9 the next. Malik Monk signed his deal a couple of years ago, but he was a premier 6th man at that time, 18, 19, $20 million range. Alex Caruso, I think, is the most direct comp for Dosunmu. He made 18.1 this season, 19.5 next season. Some other names, Andrew Nemhard, Keldon Johnson, Santi Aldama, Lou Dort, all these guys in the $18, $17 million range. As you get a little lower, you get into Grayson Allen, Alexander Walker, which that is a bargain for Alexander Walker at $14 million. Isaiah Stewart, Okongwu. So I think this demonstrates that Dosunmu is not in that lower group. He's more valuable than a guy like Isaiah Stewart and Grayson Allen, but he's less valuable than these starters, Trey Murphy, Jaden McDaniels, Josh Giddey. So that puts him right in the $18 to $20 million range, 18, 19 million. 3-year deal, 60 at the most. probably a little under that. Because I also think he's going to be motivated to come back to Minnesota. This is a team that he aligned with very well. He's thriving there. I would be hesitant if I were him to take my chances going somewhere else. This is a team that's going to make deep playoff runs, and you have a very prevalent role with them. You may even be a starter if they don't go get another point guard with DiVincenzo being out the whole year. This could be a unique opportunity for him. Now, I have them trading for a point guard, so I don't have him as the starter. I think he's a premier sixth man who can close games, can start a lot of games. So let's take another look at the cap hierarchy with that in mind. And you'll notice a change here. I have them trading for Ja Morant. And let me explain why. Ja Morant is the perfect trade target for them. Thou shall be opportunistic. This is a unique opportunity for Minnesota. They are a match made in heaven. Minnesota, a team with only Randall and DiVincenzo to trade. DiVincenzo not able to play this season. And no picks. You have maybe some second rounders. This pick in the first round they have this year, you can draft the guy and include him in the deal when you're looking to upgrade the Randall spot. Ja Morant's value is that low where Memphis will take a hard look at that offer. And absent any serious offers elsewhere, which I don't think there will be, there aren't a lot of teams in need of a point guard and have better assets to offer than someone like Randall, who's still a very good player. He's on a short-term contract. Memphis can flip him when the time is right. You have this incredibly devalued asset that Memphis is running out of time to move, who's also a 27-year-old player with upside. So he fits your timeline with your best player. He's actually gettable, and you don't have to get rid of the rest of your roster. And this Memphis location is one of the few places that would take Dante DiVincenzo and buy him out without you having to sweeten that deal. I think Morant's the right target. I've heard Durant, I've heard Kyrie. I think Kyrie actually is more risky than Ja Morant. He's 34 years old, coming off a major injury. He has a player option for the season after this one. I would much rather have the 2 years guaranteed of Ja Morant on the timeline that actually has upside. If he turns out to fit really well, I've now got this core of Edwards, Morant, McDaniels, Reed, Dosunmu. That's 5 guys all in the 27-ish age range, with Behringer and Shannon Jr. supporting them, and Gobert as a very strong contributor right now that I'm slowly phasing out. But speaking of that, this is the other reason why this Ja Morant trade is important for Minnesota. It's not just about acquiring some upside, it's about refreshing their identity and taking a new direction. With Wemby entering the league and dominating the paint in a way that you pretty much cannot match up with, operate more at the perimeter. You want to get away from the key when you're playing San Antonio. So I think not only does this Minnesota team need to get out and run more and be faster, but I also think that they need to alter their attack to be more perimeter oriented. You move Naz Reid into a starting position as a stretch big. Gobert's still your center, but you're working on phasing him out as you bring Behringer up to speed. The goal is to trade Gobert at the end of that restructured contract that I mentioned earlier. That solves some of your cap issues that you're going to have 2 years from now. So Morant at his number in the low 40s fits this budget really nicely. For the short term, this upcoming season, Gobert makes that middle layer of your hierarchy along with Dosunmu's new deal well over budget, but you're still coming in under the second apron. Another thing worth pointing out here, I think that a guy like Taurean Prince is gettable for them on the veteran minimum. He's probably worth more than a veteran minimum, but Minnesota could offer him a key bench role on a playoff team who stands to make a deep playoff run for an organization and coach that he's already played for. Before he went to Milwaukee, he was in Minnesota. That's a strong situation for Taurean Prince. And I wouldn't be surprised if he signed there. That would be an absolute home run for them. So if they're able to pull off this series of transactions, restructuring the team around Edwards, Morant, and McDaniels, being this trio of perimeter players that attack the basket, I think that puts a lot of pressure on your opponent, and it's a better overall strategy for them. They supplement with shooting from Reed and Dosunmu. Terrence Shannon Jr. needs to take a step forward. This structure keeps them under the second apron for the next couple seasons. This team would be locked up for 2 years. After that, Morant comes off your books. So if it didn't work out, okay, you have cap space now. You can move Gobert. You could have a ton of cap space while still having everybody else under contract and not being under the second apron penalty anymore. Picks to trade, you could do a lot. That's what I would do if I was Minnesota. It's what they should do. This team, while I love them, should not just be running it back. It's looking a bit stale. They have to freshen this up, reinvent themselves. And reinventing yourself means taking a fresh look at your identity, the top 3 players on your team, bringing in a new number 2 presence in Ja Morant, not just a second best player like Randall or Gobert can be, but a player that genuinely strikes fear in the opponent when they're at their best. And that's what Ja Morant does. This is now a more lethal team. And that top 6 is really strong with Behringer and Shannon Jr. If they can come into their own, that's your 8-man playoff rotation. If you bring in Prince, great. That's number 9. You can bring back Conley and Anderson. This is the absolute best version that this team could be going into next season. That's actually realistic. They're not going to trade for Giannis. They don't have picks to trade for Trey Murphy or Michael Porter Jr. I doubt how good of a fit those guys would be anyway. I think this is their best path forward. Trade for Ja Morant, become a perimeter attacking team, start Naz Reid, start getting starter production out of him. The soon move, bring him back to be your 6th man, 5th starter kind of guy, and start phasing out Gobert. That's the plan.